Now, it's difficult to confront this culture of repudiation directly. It is the product of doubts and anxieties that lie too deeply implanted in the collective psyche. But we can at least examine what religious freedom is, or ought to be, and its relation to the political order with which we are familiar. And in doing so, we can perhaps prepare ourselves with an answer to the Islamists when they tell us that religious freedom is most clearly manifest in the moment when we renounce it and submit to the will of God, after which we are no longer free. And that is what is contained in the meaning of the word Islam. This one-way religious freedom of the Muslims, compared to the two-way freedom that we enjoy in the West, is only doubtfully described as freedom, since it replaces freedom with compulsion just as soon as the choice has been made. For us, freedom is a condition that endures even after our most fundamental choices. And that is part of what Cardinal Newman meant by the grammar of assent, that our assent is always a free act of the intellect that can't be compelled from outside. Nevertheless, even in Christian cultures, religious freedom is not the clear-cut objective that we might be tempted to assume. Faith involves definite obligations, as well as a commitment to a precise moral code. A law that forbids those obligations or violates the moral code is not one that the believer can obey. A Democrat might believe that the constitution and procedures of his country confer legitimacy on its laws, but those laws might still contravene his religious code and place him under a duty of disobedience. And I think it's to understand this problem it's necessary to make some distinctions. A law might authorize conduct that faith forbids without imposing that conduct on the believer. Such a law, it seems to me, is not a threat to religious freedom. For example, laws permitting abortion and homosexual conduct which violate the religiously derived moral code of Catholics do not oblige Catholics to do anything that their faith forbids, or to refrain from doing anything that their faith commands. Catholics may regret these laws, but they are not oppressed by them. On the other hand, laws forbidding discrimination may, in certain circumstances, violate religious scruples. And we've seen an instance of this recently in Britain, where laws forbidding discrimination on grounds of sexual orientation have been used to effectively to compel adoption agencies to treat homosexual couples as on a par with a normal married family. And this is something which the Catholic Church has been unable to accept, so is now in the position of having to close down its adoption agencies and therefore violate a fundamental religious duty. There is a further dimension to all this, and it goes to the heart of what political freedom means. A Washington-based pressure group is currently campaigning to remove state funding from a marriage guidance network that uses the Bible as a leading source. The group argues that by funding this network, the state violates the No Establishment Clause, and you can see how the argument would go. What is important, however, is the result. If the campaign, which is now in the courts, is successful, the only marriage guidance available to the poor will be guidance that does not refer to the principal source of Jewish and Christian wisdom, and which will, in all probability, be committed to a secular view of marriage and to the propagation of secular remedies for what are, in many cases at least, spiritual problems. Religion will be effectively expelled from one of the areas where it has traditionally at least been most needed, which is the repairing of damaged human relations. Moreover, those who use the Bible in counselling do so because they think that it contains better advice and a wiser understanding of human nature than just about any other relevant text. Even if they don't believe the underlying theology, they are entitled to believe in its utility. But that may not be enough to obtain the funding needed to practice. Hence, the pursuit of an abstract freedom of religion leads, in this kind of case, to a freedom from religion. This, in turn, leads to a narrowing of options, with the result of promoting and privileging those which might very well be the least likely to do any good. Still, you might say, that is not a violation of religious freedom, and that is true in the negative sense. The withdrawal of state funding does not prevent anyone from using the Bible in counselling. It simply ensures that the Bible won't be used. On the other hand, this ideological vetting of state funds tends exactly in the direction that the No Establishment Clause was designed to prevent, and it's important to understand why. When the Constitution was drawn up, the state was not in the business of taking charge of civil society here in America, or of displacing religious and private foundations from their central role in education, healthcare, and the provision of social services. The No Establishment Clause did not forbid those things. It committed the state to remain neutral in the face of the existing spiritual rivalries. Today, however, the state has intruded into civil society in a way that the founders would never have envisaged. It doesn't merely fund the majority of schools, it controls them. It funds all kinds of institutions, from hospitals to rehabilitation centres, that would previously have been funded by private donations. Hence, the No Establishment Clause, interpreted as the activists would wish, obliges the state to chase religion out of the institutions of civil society. Having absorbed those institutions, the state fumigates them against the religious bug. And it does this religiously, seeking out all the nooks and crannies where religion might take hold and squirting them with ideological disinfectant. And perhaps the state controls the institutions, and because the state controls the institutions where orthodoxies arise, schools and universities, it is in effect making an establishment of religion. The religion is agnosticism, but agnosticism pursued with a kind of vindictive vehemence that has all the marks of faith. At this point, it is useful to step back from the current debate and to ask ourselves exactly what it is that religion demands of us, and just where and how the demands of religion might enter into conflict with those of the state. There are three aspects to any religion: the theological, concerning belief in transcendental things; the ritualistic, concerning the ways of worship and the tending of sacred things; and the social, concerning general morality and the community of believers. The three aspects support one another. The belief in God, for example, renders the experience of the sacred coherent. Rituals and devotional exercises put you in relation with him and fill you with the knowledge of his love. And the community of believers is renewed through ritual and acquires a kind of visceral unity that enables it to withstand external shock. Sociologists are likely to follow Durkheim in seeing religion as essentially a social phenomenon, with membership as its primary earthly goal and theological belief as the admission ticket. For Durkheim, the sacred rites gain their magic from the community that speaks through them, rather than from the transcendental beliefs which they are supposed to validate. There are religions, like the old religions of China, which remain quite vague in matters of theology, but absolutely punctilious concerning ritual. And there are religions, like some forms of Protestantism, which are the opposite, in demanding theological orthodoxy while being indifferent to ritual practice. Nevertheless, for Durkheim, the social element is always vital. You join a religion or are converted to it, and that's a matter of entering into communion with other people and becoming a member of their church or sect or whatever. Only in a small minority of cases does this conversion experience originate in intellectual argument or rational thought. In allowing religious freedom, therefore, we are allowing at least three different things. We are allowing the freedom to believe certain things, the freedom to perform certain ritual observances, and the freedom to join in communion with others. Now, the freedom to believe is simply a special case of intellectual freedom. No state can control my thoughts. The best it can do is control their expression. The minimum requirement of religious freedom, therefore, is that I should be allowed to put my faith into words and defend it against its detractors. And this freedom certainly exists in Western countries, though it is more usual to protect it as free speech than as religious freedom. The freedom to perform ritual observances is a freedom to do certain things, and can be granted only if the rituals do not contravene some precept of criminal law. Some European legal systems now forbid slaughtering animals in the manner required by the ritual of Eid, but they are not applied for fear of offending Muslims. Some would say that the fault lies with the law, which has intruded into matters which are not the rightful concern of the state. But this could not be said in the case of certain other aspects of Muslim observance. All of the following are practiced in the name of the faith by at least some Muslim communities in Europe: forced marriage, polygamy, female circumcision, and honour killing.